Hey everyone, this is Hiley. I'm the Credit Renovator, and I want to welcome you, my fellow credit renovators, in this video. Today I'm going to talk about how do you go about prioritizing, which items on your credit report that you want to dispute first, and and going over the account type so you can kind of have a strategy about how to go about starting to fix your credit and disputing the items on the report. Now, of course, you're trying to fix your credit and you got these negative items. You've already ordered your credit report. You've already reviewed the report. You've flagged and marked the items, the negative items that you want to get rid of in an attempt to clean up your credit report and raise your scores. And so in this lesson, we want to walk through how to choose which items on your credit report that you want to dispute first, and explain the different account types that affect your credit score. Now, if you take the right approach to go about doing this, it will maximize your chances of success, improve your credit score more effectively and efficiently, and help you to reach your financial goals faster. So you've probably been one of those folks who, you've tried to fix your credit yourself. You've tried a few things. You kind of went online to the different bureaus and done electronic disputes and really didn't get much success. Or if you did get some success, you probably didn't get a large increase in your scores, even when you were able to clean up some minor things. So it's important to understand which items have more bang for the buck, if you will, when you go to improve the information in your score to try to get the biggest increase in score and raising of the score. So, first question you ask, which items should you dispute first? I mean, right? Where do I start? What do I do first? So, when you're reviewing your credit report, it's important that you strategically select which items to dispute. So you say, how do you do that? So, but keep this in mind first. Some negative accounts have a bigger impact on your credit score than others. Now, I'm going to name first some of the types that you want to prioritize, that you might want to look at first if they exist on your credit report. And I'm going to kind of base these based on urgency, that you should attack, as soon as possible, and then of course in terms of overall impact to your score. So, high priority items. So these are the ones that are going to they are high priority because, number one, these things often are connected to other information. Like, for example, errors in your personal information. I talked in the other video about the importance of the personal items and clearing those up. And I spoke to that for a specific reason. So what to look for first? You want to look for incorrect addresses, misspelled names, wrong social security numbers, and birth dates. Yeah, that's important. And why does that matter? Well, it matters because that inaccurate information that's on your report could connect you to someone else, and that will increase the likelihood that any information on your credit report is having you mixed up with somebody else with a similar name, and then now that birth date with that similar name, they're sending their information to you instead of that other person, simply because they got a match on the birth social security number, or a partial match to a birthday, and it's actually not even your birthday. So it becomes a bridge to somebody else's information when you have incorrect information on there. So that's what makes the biggest difference. Not only through incorrect information, attributed debt. They could be putting someone else's debt on your credit report simply because it's a mismatch, because they went by the birth date and that similarity, and they say, oh, this must be you're James Smythe, that's James Smith. And then they say James Smythe, his birthday is 11/01 1960, and Jim Smith is 11/05, 1960, but on your credit report they say your birthday is 11/05. So they say, oh, Smith's my same thing, birthday matches, this must be our guy. And oftentimes things as simple as that can cause someone else's items to be on the credit report. I personally had that happen back in the late 80s, early 90s, where I had someone who had a similar name to mine. There were some similarities in the name, and they were attributing their negative debt information to my credit report. And I had to add to my file, watch Social Security number. Unfortunately, ironically, that person had Social Security number was very similar to mine also. So it created all kinds of mess. So they really had to, it really took me a while, about 4 years, to really get that straightened out, because they kept putting that person's negative information on my report alongside my positive information, and it just created a problem for me for a length of time until I finally got that together. But once I started cleaning up all of that, and with the notes in there about flagging for all the data points, then I no longer had that problem anymore. So the next thing you do is you want to look for fraudulent or unauthorized accounts. And so what you want to look for is accounts that are not yours, that you didn't open, that you see on your credit report, and even inquiries, because this is the important things. I know a lot of folks focus on inquiries, saying, or not thinking, but more concerned with, oh, if I get these inquiries off my credit report, I won't get these hits, because we all know, we've discussed how when you have inquiries, hard inquiries, where you've applied for something, having numerous inquiries can whittle away a little bit at your score. So, but the importance is not just the idea of getting rid of inquiries to try to get back points or anything like that. The important thing is that, number one, any inquiries on your credit, hard inquiries, were made, that you see, are two companies that you actually made an application with, and that inquiry was the result of your actual activity and not someone else's activity, which could be an indicator of identity theft or fraud. And so that's another red flag to help you be proactive and battle against that. So again, you're looking for accounts that you didn't open, creditors that you don't recognize. Now it's different, because you may see a creditor or lender of some sort that you don't recognize, and if it's a soft pull, then that just means that they got your name from some sort of list, and now they look at your credit to decide if they want to make an offer for one of their products. That might not be an indication of fraud or identity theft, but it will just tell you that the creditors are looking at you. Now, if it's a hard inquiry, that should have come from an application, and if it's for an application that you didn't make, that's a cause for concern. And so, again, why does that matter? Because identity theft obviously can severely damage your credit. It's because typically identity thieves, when they take out stuff in your name, they don't usually pay them, so they're not going to be doing activity that's going to contribute positively to your credit report. And then secondary, the idea is to spot it early and address it early before it does a lot of damage to your credit report and to your credit overall. So it's important, again, part of that credit monitoring is to look out for that stuff. And, and again, if that's something that's wrong, you want to dispute it now, report it now, so on and so forth, so that you can stop it early in its tracks before it does a substantial amount of damage. So next, any late payments that were reported in error by mistake. Because here's the thing, just because you pay on time, that's great. That's what you want to do. It's very important. It's 35% of your score is calculated from your payment history. But you always want to confirm, because even though you know you paid it on time, it would have been recorded on time if you've got notifications set up. What I recommend. So with all your creditors, when you do online payments, you should set it up with them so that they notify you that they have recorded your payment whether it's scheduled, especially when it's scheduled on auto pay, and particularly when you do them each one individually, manual every month. You should always turn that notification on. I know a lot of folks, we don't want to be bombarded with notifications by text, notifications by email all day long. But when it comes to your bills, those are the notifications you should want above and beyond any others, because you want to make sure that when you make a payment that they acknowledge it, and then and so that they acknowledge it right then and there. And then every month, if you're monitoring your credit, as I recommend you do, you check and make sure that every time you made the payment, your notification says right then and there after it was made, your payment was made, and then make sure that it got reported to the bureaus correctly. And that way, if it's wrong, if somehow, because people, we're dealing with folks, individual, real people who do these reports and reporting. You got somebody who's reporting from the creditor, someone who's receiving it at the credit bureau, so on and so forth. And so you want to make sure that it got recorded properly all the way up until that point. You discover as soon as possible, then you can dispute it, make the corrections, provide your documentation, say, no, I made my payment on time and here it is, so they can be quickly reversed before it creates a huge pull down to your credit report and your score, obviously. And so that's what makes that important. So you always don't assume that because you did it right that they reported it right, because they make mistakes. Okay, and of course, like I said, it matters most because payment history is 35% of your score. So you definitely want to make sure they got that out right at all levels on all accounts. The next thing you want to do is make sure you don't see any duplicate accounts or duplicate debts for that matter. So specifically, what are you looking for? The same account shown more than one time. Now on your credit report, if you got a tri-merge, that's the three main bureaus, because most credit reports don't show the fourth bureau, Innovis, but the three main bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, they'll show you, if you use that classic view on the credit report, it shows the three bureaus side by side. That's what I recommend is the best way to review your score. I talked about that in a previous video. But when you see an account and then you see if it's reporting to all three bureaus, you want to see remember we reviewed the information, we reviewed the account, we saw what was on Experian, what's on TransUnion, what's on Equifax. We're comparing to see that the information on that account is the same across the three bureaus. If it's not, that's an item to dispute. We want to make sure that and what's being reported consistently across the three is correct. So you want to make sure. So you may see them all, that one account, you may see all three in one line across the three columns. Sometimes for some reason, accounts get split up where you may see that account, you may see it posted on one or two of the bureaus on one line, and then later on down the line, you may see it again with that third missing one or something like that. That's not a duplicate. I'm saying when the exact account is being recorded across the board here, then you scroll down and then it's being reported somewhere else. If that's a duplication, make sure you check account numbers and all that stuff. If that is an exact duplication of the accounts, especially when it's negative, you want to make sure that gets disputed to make sure that they're not reporting duplications, and especially negative duplications, right? Because also too, when you got duplication of accounts, it shows a duplication of total debt, which could hurt your utilization if you got something like, revolving accounts over 30%, then they're being reported twice. So now it looks like you're twice as reckless. So again, any and all negative accounts, you want to make sure they're not being reported duplicate and in duplication, and then you want to dispute those as soon as possible, because that's an easy way. If that's weighing your score down, that's a quick and easy way to raise your score, because it's easy to prove duplication and it's easy to remove that and fairly quickly. Okay, now medium priority items. So I just talked about the high priority items because those are the items that have the biggest impact on your score. They're often the easiest to fix, things like duplication, and so you can get some quick wins if that exists on your credit report. Now, medium priority items that you want to dispute next, say for instance, outdated negative accounts. So what do you want to look for in outdated negative accounts? You want to look for any accounts that should have been removed more than 7 years from the date of first delinquency, because we always talk about the negative items being deleted after 7 years, but you got to be straight on what 7 years, depending on the different accounts. Some of them are 7 years plus 180 days from first late payment. Other types of accounts, if it's that's for a normal collection account, and that's from the original creditor versus a different types. They have different, but roughly they're all around 7 years, with the exception of bankruptcies, the different timelines. But the key is it's 7 years from what date? First late payment date, 180 days. So if you were late in January for the first time, you never recovered. You stayed late from January, and then 6 months later, at the end of June, 180 days passed, and you never recovered. You never got back there. So it went from 30, 60, 90 days late, day 91 default from 91 to 120 days. At day 121, you're in, from 91 to day 120 is collections. Then from day 121 to day 150 is charge off. After 150 days, it's charged off, and then at 180 days, that's when they usually write it off altogether. And so from 180 days from January when you made that, so 6 months after you first was late, the clock starts for that to expire. So then from there, 7 years from that 180, first 180, first 6 months. So in total, 7 years and 6 months from when you were first late in January of 2025, that account would expire and could no longer, no matter whether you paid it or not, they can no longer report it on your credit report. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to automatically fall off. It should, but often it doesn't. But that's easy. If that's the case and it's been more than 7 years, you can easily dispute it. They can easily have it removed without paying anything. Now, I just like to remind you that we're talking about credit, not debt. You may still owe the debt, but they can no longer report it on your credit report. So there's a distinction there. So you could still end up, in theory, if you hadn't already, have that collection account. They could still reach out to you, but they just can't report it on credit. They could still demand payment, but they just can't report it on credit. They could still take you to court, but they just can't report it on credit. So that's the distinction that a lot of people know. But I know we're focusing on credit, but I do want you guys to be knowledgeable about that, because we want to clean up debt too. That way it becomes sustainable and your finances all together. But again, for the focus here, I know we're focusing on credit. So that's where your expiration dates come from, because people always shout out about, oh, don't pay a collection, it'll fall off after 7 years, but they never tell you 7 years from when, because it's not one simple answer. The 7-year mark starts at different places depending on whether it's a collection, charge off, creditor, delinquent account, bankruptcy. All of those different items have slightly different expiration dates. 7 years is a part of most of them. 7 years is a piece, but then there's another date. But that floating date, 7 years is a component, but they never say 7 years from when. And that's the distinction, because it's different with different types of debt. And so, if you got to make sure you know when the clock really starts down to the day, because there's a specific date that the clock starts at, and then yes, it's 7 years plus 180 days, or 2 years, or 3 years, depending on the account type. So that's the important part. If you want more information about that part, you feel free. I can send you a link on that and kind of give you the debt clock with the schedules. I may even print something as a PDF and add that. If you guys want to click a link and get that. But I will provide that because it's important to know that debt clock and the different accounts. And if you're close to those dates, it's important to know that too, because obviously that's part of things to dispute. So that is where it matters. The next thing that's important is incorrect loan balances or credit limits. So what are we looking for on those? Accounts that show incorrect balances, even if it's only slightly off, or if they're showing your credit limits lower than what you actually do have. You want to make sure that's correct, because number one, credit utilization on your revolving accounts is calculated by what your actual balance is and what your actual credit limit is. So it's your balance divided by your credit limit. So if you have if they're showing your balance higher than it's supposed to, than it is, and your utilization is correct, your total limit is reported correctly, you could end up showing the utilization higher than what really is. In other words, if you're close, if it's showing it incorrectly and it's showing you over 30%, that's hurting your credit unnecessarily. Or you might have the right balance, but then they got your credit limit too low. Again, that correct balance divided by that reduced incorrect credit limit could again negatively impact you, because if they reduce your credit limits, your utilization rises and it impacts your credit negatively in a way based on the wrong information. That's why it's important to make sure that your balance is correct on each of the 3 bureaus, on every bureau that account reports to, because it could be 1, could be 2, could be all 3, and that the credit limit is correct. So not only is it correct, but it's correct and consistent across all the bureaus that it's reporting on, and that the utilization is coming out to the right number. Not the total utilization, as a lot of the credit monitoring companies, particularly Credit Karma, will tell you your credit utilization is good because they're combining all your accounts together. You manage your utilization on an individual account. So each account, you want to be at 30%. So don't think you can have this one maxed out because this one is low. No, you want to have it 30% or less. I tell clients to stay between 15-20% across each individual revolving account. What's a revolving account? Credit card or line of credit. So you want to make sure your balance is below 30% of your credit limit. Try to keep it between 15 and 20. You'll get the best. That's the cleanest, the most optimum report, and you get the most points added to your score when you stay in that range. Okay. Next thing. Well, actually, those are the only those 2 are the only medium priority. Now, there's some lower priority things that, yes, you want to have your credit as clean as possible, but you want to make sure you manage everything's both great and small, because everything counts. So here are some lower priority items, but still important nonetheless. So if you got any accounts that you settled or you paid off and they're still being reported as unpaid. So what are you looking for? Accounts that show a balance where the balance should be 0. But it goes a little bit further than that. So it's more than just the balance. So say, for instance, you had a collection, and then the account, you went delinquent and account ended up in collections, even charge off, but then later you went back and reached out to either them or a third-party collection agency that took over that account, and you paid it off, whether in full or through a negotiated settlement where you paid less than the full amount. Sure, they're supposed to update the balance to 0 because you paid what you agreed to pay. But oftentimes you will see that the account status doesn't get updated from collection / charge off, because remember, you paid it, so it's no longer a collection. It should be marked as satisfied. It is often still regarded as a derogatory account. Again, you paid it off even after post collection, so it should no longer be a derogatory account. It should be a satisfied account. You may see comments in the comment section or the remarks. Sometimes in some reports they refer to it as remarks or comments. You'll see things like account paid, settled after collections or after charge off. So essentially what you want to do is you want to so why does that matter? I'll talk about that first, but you may see those things. Most people, when they pay off a collection, the only thing they check for is that the balance was updated. Those other things are important too, because those all are negative data points that contribute to your score being lower. So why else does it matter? Well, even though they don't hurt you as much as like late payments or anything like that, but the accuracy you want to have, and again, those negative data points, don't want to be whittling away at your score. So if you're currently in a situation where you had prior collection / charge off that you paid, and the only update you saw to the account was a change in balance, those are items you want to dispute, and you want to dispute them as being inaccurate, because you want your account to be updated to reflect what happened, that you're no longer it's no longer a collection, it's now a satisfied account. It's no longer a charge off because it's now a satisfied account. And now you may have a tough battle with the remarks, because they say paid after collections. That's true, but you want to ask and try to get them to remove that because it's less negative data. But if ultimately that part they won't remove, eventually you'll just wait for it to fall off after 7 years. But during that time you're waiting, you don't want your score to be drugged down like an anchor. So you want to always work to try to resolve as many inaccuracies as possible, and then any other negative data points, and try to appeal to them to remove them, sort of as a customer courtesy type thing for anything. Or sometimes you bug them down just to get them to, then they'll update it just to get you to go away, because by law they have to respond every time you tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, I'm asking about this, I'm looking about this, especially when you're sending them directly to the creditors themselves. So hard inquiries, let's talk about those. I mentioned them earlier. So what are we looking for? Exactly, like hard inquiries, like I said before, from companies that you don't recognize, applications and dates where you had no activity. And so any inquiries made on your credit hard inquiries without your authorization, that company, whether they weren't trying to solicit to you or not, or anything you didn't authorize should not be removed. And of course, that's really significant with inquiries, because although inquiries don't impact your score that much on an individual basis, 3, 4, 5 points, you don't want to accumulate a large number of inquiries accumulated on your credit, neither by yourself through some bad applying for credit, or through some fraudulent activity as well, because it does add up. Somebody go out and they're trying to run up a bunch of stuff in your name, and they generate 10, 20 inquiries. Yeah, I mean, you could be looking at 50, 60, 100 points off your credit just in inquiries alone. But the bigger problem is somebody's got access, and so we need to shut that down through freezes and making reports to the agencies to address any and all of these possible fraudulent activity and identity theft. So the biggest thing is, so why does it matter? Because number one, I just told you the points. But the fact is that hard inquiries unchallenged that remain on your credit impact you for 12 months. and then they show up for another 12 after that, but they really hurt your score in that first 12 months. So anything that shouldn't be there, we should try to get it off as fast as possible so that your score can rebound and reflect reality and be correct and be accurate. So that's the important thing. So, okay, let's talk about the different types of credit and how they affect your overall credit report and your scores. So, of course, we know in your credit report you have multiple types, different types. You got revolving accounts, you got installment loans, and then even with installment loans, you got auto loan, you got a personal loan, signature loan. Within revolving, you got credit cards, you got lines of credit, things of that nature. All these things affect your credit score differently. They're looked at differently, and so that they have different implications to your overall credit score. Each one has a unique impact on your credit score. Each one is a unique component that the algorithm looks at when calculating score. So let me tell you about how these different account types, how they actually influence your score, your scores, and how you want to manage them. So first we talk about revolving accounts, because that's one most people know, also known as credit reports and lines of credit. So how they impact your credit score. Well, of course, credit cards have a really high impact on your credit score, particularly because there's two pieces. There's credit utilization and credit payment history. So, credit utilization, I talked about that many, many times. I'm sure you guys all know. That's that calculation where they take your balance divided by your total credit limit. How you manage that, the red line is 30%, but to be in a good place, you want to be as low as possible. 0 is not the answer, but you do want to be as low as possible. Sweet spot is between 10 and 20% of your total credit limit that you use. Creditors are happy because you have activity that generates revenue for them. Credit bureaus and the algorithm like it because it has some information activity to make a determination on how you use your credit. See, if you don't use it, it can't judge how you manage your credit because you're not using it. Not using it is not a demonstration of management, as much as some people like to believe. They think by having a 0 that's going to be good. Typically, that can lead to accounts being closed due to inactivity, which actually hurts your score. So you want to demonstrate that you can manage this credit. If they give you $10,000 worth of credit and you never go over $3,000, especially you stay in 1,000 to 2,500, they say, wow, this is a person who has good restraint, good judgment. They're not relying heavily on credit to live. They must have income, but most of all, they have discipline. So that's what utilization means. And then, of course, with revolving credit, making your payment on time, like everything else, they want to make sure that you're not heavily relying on credit and that you're making your payments on time, which indicates you got good cash flow, you got good income to support the payments there. So revolving credit is a 1-2 punch in terms both positive and negative to how it impacts, how it affects your score and what your overall credit report looks like. So, when do you dispute any of these things? So if your account shows an incorrect balance, if account shows incorrect credit limits, you want to dispute it because you want to make sure that your credit report is reflecting the correct credit utilization, like I mentioned earlier. Okay, now you got installment loans. Those are auto loans, mortgages, student loans, personal loans, where you simply you borrow a lump sum and then you're making regular monthly payments. So how do they impact your score? Well, of course, they help to define your credit mix, because if your credit is all credit cards, they look at that as an imbalance. So part of your credit score is where they look at the mix of the different types of accounts that you have. They like to see a mix of revolving credit cards, installment loans like a car, even a mortgage, and any others. They like to see a mix because they know that tells them that you know how to manage different types of credit simultaneously, thus making you a lower credit risk. About 10% of your credit score comes from that mix, and having the right mix helps get you that full 10% in points. 10% of that overall to get you as close to 800 as possible. So obviously late payments on installment loans are the worst because because when it comes to managing an installment loan, you really only got one job. That's to make the payment, and then subsequently you make the payment on time and in full. And so that's the only thing that matters. But they figured this is simple. There's no magic here. All you got to do is make the payments on time consistently, and meet your obligation. You do that, you got solid points all the way around. You typically can't have, if you never miss a payment, you're never late, and you always make payments on your loans, especially installment loans. It's very rare that you're gonna have a low score that way. And so, when do you dispute anything related to that? To installment loans? Well, you would dispute if they show incorrect pay history. It shows late payments when you say, no, I never paid late. And so then what you want to do is, if it's your impression that you pay late, go back and look at your system. Are you doing online payments? Are you doing scheduled online payments, or do you pay manually every month? Do you pay at the creditor site, or do you pay from your bank site? I found that a lot of people run into problems when they pay their bills by going to their bank website and say, pay my bill. Essentially, they're saying, pay my bill for me. And then they're letting the bank make their payments for them rather than going to the creditor site, set up bill payment in there, and giving them permission to go in your bank account and take the payment. That is the better way to go, because that way you put the responsibility on the creditor to go get the money because you gave him permission to go get it. So it's usually less mistakes when you pay that way versus using your bank account's online bill paying from the account rather than giving them permission to come out of the account. I know it sounds confusing, but just think it's difference. It's a difference because when you go through the bank, you're asking them to pay your bills for you. The better way to do is to go in and tell your creditor, I give you permission to take the money every month. It'll be there at the set due date, whatever you set up. So make sure you follow up on that. But if you can show that you never had, if they're showing you have late payments and you can prove and you have documentation saying I've never been late, that's easy to fix if they're reporting you late incorrectly. And if it's an account that's paid off and closed, if it's an outdated balance and you say, no, I have proof that this account was paid in full, you want to provide documentation with your dispute letter, as you would with any disputes. You always want to provide whatever documentation you have. If you say, no, it's not what's on credit, this is what really happened, and here's my documentation supporting that, that's how you get stuff removed. If you don't have the documentation, you don't provide the documentation, it'll take you twice as long and it'll be 3 times as hard to get things removed without that documentation and trying to get them to go after and go look for what you say exists rather than providing it to them. Your success goes up by leaps and bounds when you have documentation to prove your position. Okay. Collection accounts. This is one that is particularly bad because the presence of collection accounts will absolutely crush your credit score. And so examples of collections being, debt sold to collection agencies, what we refer to as third party, and those could be anything as still medical bills. If they're over $500, they're still being reported on credit. Credit cards that went belly up and then you didn't pay them. You went 30, 60, 90 days, collection, charge off, and then they sold it. And now it's coming to you as a third-party collection agent to many of those companies, many you've probably never heard of. or even utility bills. Because even though utility bills, the original accounts don't show up on credit unless you're doing self-reporting of that. But typically, utility bills will end up on your credit if you don't pay the balance. They sell it off to a third-party collection agency who then either reach out to you first to try to get payment. If they don't hear from you, then they report to credit. And then you still got to start looking at the debt clock based on your original delinquency with the original utility. But again, if you want to get it off of credit, if you're saying you don't owe it, you want to dispute it, if you have proof. Of course, we always want to do validation and verification, particularly with third-party collection agencies, because we want to know that this third-party collection agency, who we have no relationship with in terms of this debt, has the legal right to collect and has the right to report on your credit report. Because again, we can go back to that, looking at them not be reporting the credit, but we can also look at tackling the debt itself. But if our primary goal is to get it off of credit, we explore that. If we can resolve the debt along the way, that's even better. And so, question: when do you dispute that? Obviously you would dispute any medical bill with a balance less than $500, because that shouldn't be on credit. So if you see medical bills and the balance is less than $500, you can dispute that away right there. Hey, let me call you back. And sorry about that. And that's something new that's coming along too. There was a new rule. There was a new rule that said all medical collections would no longer be reported on credit. But there's been some turmoil with President Trump and all the changes and regulations that he got, and so that's an ongoing thing. But as of this video, you should not see any medical bills on your credit report less than $500. If you do, those can easily be disputed away from your credit. Now they shouldn't be there. Now again, whether you owe on the debt, that's a different story. That I feel you should pursue that and find out if it's a legitimate debt. You still want to pay it, because it can still end up later as a garnishment, anything like that. But as far as being on credit, it should not be there if it's less than $500. If it's any other type of debt that ended up with a third-party collection agency, again, an old utility, old credit card account, old installment loan account, you want to do validation and verification. Make sure that they can legally report it on your credit. They can legally come after you for it. Then after that, then we look at statutes to see if that, obviously you want to make sure it's not an expired account, it's not beyond statute of limitations or any of those things. Once we verify that the account actually does belong to you and they can legally collect on it, then we look into see maybe a negotiated payment or settlement of some sort. The priority being get it off your credit so that your credit report's better. Okay? And so you want to clear that up. You want to clear that up and get all of that. And then obviously, if that third-party collection is reporting on the same debt that your original creditor is still reporting on, and they're showing it transferred out and all that, you want to make sure you can argue on the fact that it's a duplicate account and things like that. So that's the strategy you want to look at as well. Now, when it comes to being concerned with public record, bankruptcies, tax liens, judgments, anything like that, how do they impact your score? Well, of course, bankruptcies, tax liens, and court judgments are long-term negative impacts to your credit, because bankruptcies remain on your credit for up to 10 years. Now, with Chapter 7, which is total liquidation, it's 7 years from discharge. And then with, 10 years from discharge. And then with Chapter 13, where you did a repayment plan, it's 7 years from when your plan closed out. And so those have long term. But if you had them and you filed them, the only thing you're really doing is just watching for the expiration to pass, where it drops off your credit score. So, question, when do you dispute that? Well, of course, you want to ensure that they're being accurately reported. If you had a 13, you don't want to see it as a 7 and vice versa. If you have a tax lien and it really was yours, you want to make sure that. If you have a judgment, you want to make sure it's yours. But you want to make sure that when the elapsed time, the expiration dates, that they are actually falling off and being removed. Of course, you check your dates. If it's still reporting, you can easily dispute that and request that it be removed. They check the records, make sure you got the right date, and then they remove it accordingly. It's pretty straightforward. It's not hard at all. So, authorized user accounts. So many folks, as a strategy, and it is one that is viable, where you can be an authorized user on someone else's credit account in order to benefit from their positive credit history, because it'll report on your account like it's one of yours. So how do they impact your score? Now, obviously, if we want to know that it's a positive account, that if it's revolving, it's low. It has low utilization, and that there's all positive pay history, no late payments, anything like that. Because there's no point of becoming an authorized user on an account if it's a negative account that only hurts your account. So that's, should be pointed out, because I've seen many people say, oh, I became an authorized user on my aunt, my mother, my brother, my sister, but they got bad account history. And I'm like, why are you here? There's no point in being an authorized user on this account, because it's all this negative information that's only hurting you. It's not helping you. So it can improve your score if it's a good account history. However, even if it started out good, it should, it would be not beneficial to do that. So prioritizing disputes based on impact timeline. So you want to start with errors that have the largest impact on your score: the late payments, the collections, the fraudulent accounts. All of those should be addressed first, since they have the biggest impact and most significant impact to your score. Secondly, you want to address any errors that might cause legal issues. Incorrect debts that are show as unpaid, address them so you don't end up with any lawsuits or court appearances. Dispute items before applying for any new credit. I tell people this all the time. You should always try to fix your bad credit before you try to go out and get new credit, because the existence of what's on your report now is going to have a real bad impact on anybody, on your applications, because they're going to go and look at your credit and see what's already there negatively, and they're going to have concerns about giving you new credit. So you can't use new credit to outbill old credit. You got to fix the old credit negative stuff first as best you can, because if you don't, then you're most likely going to end up with a lot of denials, or if you actually do get credit extension, it's going to be low and not of good quality. And so that's important. So 4 key takeaways: dispute the high priority items first, review your credit reports regularly, understand how each account affects your score, and then document every step in your dispute process. So choosing the right items to dispute and understanding how the different account types that affect your credit scores are essential. And these steps towards improving your financial health are especially important. And it's important that you do them in the right order. It's more efficient. By prioritizing the most impactful items and following this strategic approach, you can maximize your score improvements in the shortest amount of time, especially. Now, when you use the strategies that I outlined to you today, you will always have and maintain a positive credit history going forward, because you want to get in the habit of doing things the right way and avoid doing things the wrong way, and then you will always have success. So hopefully you found this one successful.